Hello there, Ruby here with another art lesson from the garden. Today we're going to be starting off our new session with a very simple sketching lesson working from observation. I like to start with this lesson because it really teaches us how to see and helps us find values and details. And the more you practice drawing, especially this type of drawing from observation, the better you see and the better you can draw, paint, and even sculpt. So we're going to be starting by choosing an object. I recommend choosing something that's really simple, like an orange, something that's mostly one color, or I have a lemon here, or an apple is a really good choice, or I have this kind of funky bottle gourd from the garden that I'm going to work from today. So we want to start out really nice and simple, and then we can move into things with more complex shapes and textures and details. But for now, we want to really start off learning how to see. So when I'm looking at this object, I first want to get an understanding of what the shapes are. So when I'm looking at the gourd, I see it has a really big bottom part, which is basically a circle. And then there's a little bit of a neck, and it leads into kind of an oval or almost like an almond shape. And then its stem is thinner and kind of has a little curve to it. I want to make sure that the object is sitting in front of me so I don't have to hold it and I don't have to move it, because when it moves, the shapes move and change, and the values, which are the lights and darks we're going to explore, also change. So you notice that when I pick this up, this looks totally different. And the light parts here and the dark parts move around on the object. So I want to make sure that it's stationary and it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm going to start off with a sketching pencil. This pencil doesn't even have an eraser because I want to get out of the habit of starting over again each time I don't like something. Like if I make a line that I don't like, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to just keep going with my drawing. I don't need to run for an eraser every time I do something I don't like. I'm going to work with it, change it, and revise it. So I noticed that this object is kind of diagonal. So I'm going to say it's taking up kind of this space on my paper. And you can see I'm starting out with really light lines. I want to start out by barely touching the paper. And then I don't get so frustrated if I do something that I don't like. I'm just going to draw over it. So I'm starting out thinking about where is this object going to go on the paper. And then I want to start with the biggest parts first. So I noticed that that bottom kind of rounded shape is really big. And then it gets thinner and kind of goes into that neck part. And then there's a long oval up here. Okay, and see I'm starting out really simple, really lightly, and I'm really spending a lot of time looking at the object and looking at the drawing. Looking at the object, looking at the drawing. I see that the stem kind of goes up and curves over. So I'm getting a sense for where things are. So as I go along, I'm going to start out really nice and simple and really lightly, and then I'm going to start refining, revising, and editing, making changes. Anything that I see that's a little bit different, I can change in my drawing. So I'm kind of following where the edge of this goes, and I can ask myself, does the line go out? Does it go up? Does it go down? I kind of want to follow that along, and I see it kind of goes out a little bit, then it goes down, then it goes out a little bit more and around. So I'm following the edge. I'm still keeping my lines as light as I can, and then I see it kind of has this beautiful gradual curve that goes into the bottom part. And I know it's not a perfect circle, it's an organic shape or an organic object. So I know it's not going to be perfect. I see it's a little bit longer on this side. So I'm just trying to draw what I see. So once I've figured out my basic shapes and I've drawn those in really nice and lightly, I can look for the shadow shape, which is an important part of the object. This connects it to the space that it's in. And I see this shadow kind of goes outside of where the paper ends. It's a little bit late in the day. It's got a nice long shadow. I just used this rock to prop up the gourd in a position that I liked it. So I can draw that rock in if I want to, or I can skip it. I think I'm just going to skip it and work on focusing on the object. So now that I've found where the basic shapes are, I've got the shadow figured out in there, then I'm going to look for the values. So if you look at this sketch that I did before, we see the values are the darks and the lights. Any object that's 3D or three-dimensional, not flat, has different values. So I saw that this had a dark shadow, and then a very light area. This is in a different position, but I can see that here too. I see a darker shadow. I see a highlight, which is the brightest spot. I see a highlight on this part of the object. I see a darker shadow here. I see this shadow that's underneath the object is very dark. So I want to look for those dark parts and light parts. These dark parts and light parts are what make the object look 3D. So for example, if I look at a piece of white paper, I see the shadow from the orange, but other than that I don't see any values because it's flat. If I crumple this paper, all of a sudden, when it's not flat, I see dark parts and light parts because the light hits it in certain ways. So under here is dark, up here where the light is hitting it, it's light. So anytime an object is 3D, it has values. So we're really going to look for the values on this object and try to make it look, instead of flat like it does right now, I want it to look 3D. So the light is coming from this direction. So I see that this side is lighter and this side is darker. So I can hold my pencil like a magic wand and start shading. Shading is filling in an area of value. Every part of this object has a value. It's either light, medium, dark, super light, super dark, any one of these values. So, ran into a little bump on my paper. So I'm getting this information from the object. And I want you guys at home to be clear, you're not drawing my object here. This is on screen. You're drawing an object in real life, an object of your choice. And that's really important so that you can find the values and make yours look 3D. So you're not just copying my gourd, you're looking at your own object. So I'm getting all this information from the object in front of me, trying to figure out where is it light, where is it dark. I'm using a graphite sketching pencil to do this, which is really similar to your regular number 2 pencil at home. Mine is a little bit softer, which means that I can make darker values and I can blend, which means moving the graphite around with my finger. But you can probably do that with your number 2 pencil at home also. So I'm really trying to figure out, okay, this is the lightest part, which is also called the highlight. And the lightest part is going to be the lightest value. So that could be the light of the papers, the lightest value. So I see that that's kind of in this area. So I know that I don't want to shade that area. I want that to stay nice and light. I'm noticing that there's kind of a line here, like a ridge in the gourd that I didn't notice when I had it in a different position. So that can start to look a little bit 3D as I shade it. I also want to remember that shadow. So to me, the shadow looks darker than the object. This isn't always the case, but I'm going to kind of add in the shadow, pretend that my rock's not there, and add the shadow around the object. And you can see that that connects it to the space, makes it feel like it's actually sitting on the table or sitting on a paper. And it gives us a nice edge. So oftentimes the shadow is darkest closest to the object. So you can kind of see here where I'm looking, you can kind of see it under the rock or like kind of around here where the shadow might be darkest. And I can soften that to make it feel like it's part of the background. It's helpful when you're doing a sketch like this from observation that you have really good light. I see the light is coming from this side of the object, and that's really helpful. If the light was coming from above or coming from all directions, I might not have as much contrast. So contrast is the difference between dark and light, and I'm seeing a good amount of contrast here. So I have a really dark value on this side of the object. So that's something to keep in mind when you're finding a place to draw. I'm noticing that there's a highlight here and a highlight here, so I'm trying to preserve the highlight by just sketching around it, and that gets to be kind of the light of the paper. Okay, you can see a little bit better there. I don't want to forget about the details, which are the little things. Like I noticed that this stem curves around a little bit, and it has some texture to it. When I look really closely, I can see it has these fibers or lines that make up the stem. I also see it has a darker part at the top where it's broken and a little piece that sticks off. There's a little change in value where the stem and the gourd meet also. So when you're working on a drawing like this, the longer you take, the more 3D it will become, because you'll notice more value, more changes in value. So I usually like to take at least 10 or 15 minutes for a drawing like this. I like to make it about the size of my hand, and I really want to avoid making a dark outline. When we think about outline, it tends to make things look flat. So if I did this gourd with just an outline, this is going to look flat. So I really am focusing not on a dark line that goes around it like a cartoon. Here I have a dark area that's a shadow that's underneath it. And you see the difference. It's this darkness is part of the shadow that's under the object. It's not a line that goes around the object. So I like to soften the graphite a little bit, especially if the object is smooth like this one is. You could think about textures if it has any, like this orange. Has these little, it has some wrinkles here and it has some little bumps all over it. So that's the kind of texture you could look for in your object. But our main focus is trying to make this look 3D. So you can see I didn't need to use my eraser because I started out drawing lightly, and most of the lines that I didn't like or I wasn't sure about ended up being part of my drawing. At the very end, if you have some of these kind of lines that you don't like, you can clean up your drawing a little bit, or you could think about maybe incorporating them into the drawing. Maybe add a little bit more of a background texture. So you might think that this is a simple activity, but as you can see, I've done this many times. And the more I do it, the better I get at seeing and the better I get at drawing. So it's a really great exercise, especially if you're looking at objects in nature. Thanks so much. I hope you guys have fun.